Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters. In life, we all face challenges and moments of hardship, but for those who believe in Allah, there is a powerful promise that helps us endure and find peace in the midst of it all. The topic of today's video is one of hope, faith, and ultimate closure. Your case is closed, a message that Allah promises us when He deems it is time for our struggles to end. Allah, in His infinite mercy, assures the believers that they will not face the same trials again once they have been resolved. This is a beautiful and profound message that resonates deeply with the believer. No matter how heavy or prolonged the struggle may seem, there is a moment when Allah says, "It is over." The pain, the tests, and the suffering will not be repeated. Allah closes the case, and we are granted relief and peace. This promise is mentioned in the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, reminding us that after hardship comes ease. Before starting this video, do not forget to like this video, because it gives us a lot of strength to continue sharing beneficial content. And I invite you to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell to stay informed of our upcoming publications on the Islamic faith. Thank you, and good video. In this video, we will explore this comforting promise of Allah, why it's significant for believers, and how we can find strength and closure in knowing that once Allah has closed the case, it truly is over. We will dive into the spiritual meaning behind this and reflect on how it applies to our own struggles. Stay with us as we unravel this beautiful concept in Islam and remind ourselves that no matter the situation, it is over when Allah decides it is. 2. Understanding your case is closed. The phrase, "your case is closed," holds a deep and powerful meaning in the context of Islamic faith. It signifies the ultimate closure of an ordeal or difficulty in life that Allah has decided to end. When we face struggles, they often feel endless. But in Islam, we are reminded that Allah, in His infinite wisdom, has the power to bring an end to our trials when He deems it appropriate. Imagine a court case where a judge delivers a final verdict. Once the case is closed, no further arguments or appeals can be made. Similarly, when Allah declares that a trial or difficulty has reached its end, it is a final decision. The hardship you've endured is over, and no further burden will come from that same source. This is a profound reminder that Allah's plan is always perfect, even when we can't immediately understand the reasoning behind our trials. Allah has control over everything, including the events that seem overwhelming in our lives. His decision to close our case means that He has decided that this specific challenge will no longer affect us. The key here is trust. Trusting that Allah, the best of planners, has brought about this closure for our ultimate benefit and peace of mind. This concept of case closed is a spiritual release. It's not just the end of a trial, but the beginning of a new chapter where the believer can experience peace, healing, and renewal. As we continue through this video, we'll explore how this finality from Allah serves as a source of comfort and assurance for those going through hardships. It is a reminder that no matter how difficult our challenges are, when Allah closes a chapter, it truly is over. 3. The struggles of life in Islam. In life, every believer will face trials and tribulations. These challenges are part of the human experience and are something that Allah has decreed for us. However, in Islam, we are taught that these struggles are not random or pointless. Rather, they have a purpose in the grand scheme of Allah's plan. Every difficulty we face is an opportunity for spiritual growth, for purification, and for drawing closer to Allah. The Quran reminds us, "Do not say about those who are killed in the way of Allah, they are dead. Rather, they are alive, but you do not perceive." Quran 2, 154. This verse highlights the idea that even in the midst of struggles, there is life that leads to greater understanding and reward. The Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, also taught that the believer is never without reward in their trials. In a famous hadith, he said, "If a believer is afflicted with hardship, His sins are forgiven as long as he remains patient and steadfast. Every trial we face is an opportunity for purification. Whether it's the loss of a loved one, financial difficulties, health issues, or emotional struggles, these moments are meant to test our patience, our trust in Allah, and our resilience. They are reminders of our dependence on Allah and our need for Him in every aspect of life. 4. The role of patience and trust in Allah. In times of hardship, the believer is guided by two essential virtues: patience, Sabr, and trust, Tawakkul, in Allah. These qualities are fundamental in Islam, especially when facing life's trials. Patience is not just about enduring the pain, but it's also about maintaining faith in Allah's plan, knowing that He will eventually bring ease after the difficulty. Trusting in Allah's wisdom and mercy helps us to endure and stay hopeful, even when we cannot immediately see the solution. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes the importance of patience. Allah says, "O you who have believed, seek help through patience and prayer. Indeed, Allah is with the patient." Quran chapter 2, 153. This verse teaches us that patience is not only a form of endurance, but also a means of seeking Allah's help. In times of difficulty, prayer and patience go hand in hand, allowing the believer to stay connected to Allah and gain strength. Patience doesn't mean that we passively accept our circumstances without hope. Instead, it means that we actively wait for Allah's decree, trusting that He knows what is best for us. The Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, said, "How amazing is the affair of the believer. His matter is always good, and this is for no one except the believer. If something good happens to him, he is thankful, and that is good for him. And if something harmful happens to him, he is patient, and that is good for him." Sahih Muslim. This hadith shows that both moments of ease and moments of difficulty are opportunities for the believer to grow closer to Allah. 5. Testimonies and stories of relief. One of the most powerful ways to understand the promise, "You will never go through this again," is by looking at real-life stories of individuals who have experienced relief after a period of hardship. These testimonies serve as living proof of Allah's mercy and the eventual closure that He brings to the trials of the believer. There are countless stories in the Islamic tradition of individuals who endured great challenges but were ultimately granted relief and closure by Allah. One such story is that of the Prophet Ayub, Job, who faced unimaginable suffering. He lost his health, wealth, and family, but he remained patient and steadfast in his faith. Allah, in His mercy, eventually granted him relief, restoring his health, wealth, and family. The Quran says, "And we gave him back his family, twice as many, as a mercy from us and a lesson for people of reason." Quran 38:43. This story teaches us that after the greatest of trials, there is divine relief, and the promise of closure is realized. Similarly, in modern times, there are countless individuals who have faced hardships, whether it be illness, financial struggle, or personal loss. And many of them have shared how their faith in Allah sustained them during their difficult times, and how after their struggles ended, they found peace and joy. One testimony shared by a believer recalls a time of severe financial hardship, where debts piled up, and they felt like there was no way out. But they continued to trust Allah, pray, and remain patient. Eventually, their situation turned around, and they found stability. They recalled the feeling of closure when the financial burden was finally lifted, and they knew that Allah had answered their prayers. 6. The concept of closure in Islam. In Islam, the concept of closure is not just about the end of a difficult period. It is about spiritual peace, relief, and a sense of resolution that Allah grants to the believer once the trial is over. When we speak of Allah closing a case, we are talking about the divine process through which the believer is freed from the burden of the trial and is allowed to move forward with renewed strength and faith. Closure, in this context, means that the trials we face in life are not open-ended. There is always a conclusion. Allah promises that after hardship comes ease, and once a challenge has been overcome, it is done. This is the essence of Allah's mercy. Allah, the most compassionate and merciful, ensures that the difficulty that a believer has faced will not continue indefinitely. When Allah closes the case, the believer is freed from the trial and peace is restored. In the Quran, Allah tells us, "Indeed, with every difficulty there is relief." Quran 94:6. This verse reassures the believer that no matter how hard a situation may seem, it will eventually end. Once the case is closed, the believer is no longer held by the burden of that trial. For instance, during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, the believers went through immense hardships, but their faith was tested and purified through those trials. The concept of closure is seen in the eventual victory and peace that Allah granted them. The Battle of Badr, for example, marked the closure of a long period of hardship for the early Muslims, and with that victory, a new chapter of strength and triumph began. 7. Spiritual healing and growth. After the end of any trial, the believer experiences a process of spiritual healing and growth. Allah's promise that it is over is not just the end of physical or emotional hardship, it also marks the beginning of spiritual renewal. Every test, no matter how painful, offers a chance for spiritual elevation, and once the trial is over, it leads to a stronger connection with Allah and a greater understanding of His mercy. In Islam, hardship is viewed as a form of purification. The Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, said, "When Allah intends good for someone, He afflicts them with trials." Sahih Bukhari. This hadith emphasizes that the believer's hardships are not punishments, but rather opportunities for spiritual refinement. When a person goes through a trial with patience and trust in Allah, they are purifying their soul. The difficulty helps cleanse them of past sins and brings them closer to Allah, making them stronger in their faith. Once the case is closed and the trial is over, this purification process continues. The believer emerges from the difficulty with a renewed sense of faith, greater resilience, and a deeper understanding of Allah's plan. This spiritual growth is part of the divine mercy. The Prophet, PBUH, further stated, "The believer is like a palm tree. Its roots are strong, and even if it's shaken, it grows back stronger." Sahih Bukhari. Similarly, when the believer faces challenges and trusts in Allah, they become spiritually stronger and more resilient. 8. The end of struggles. The meaning of it is over. When Allah says, "It is over," it signifies more than just the end of a trial. It represents the complete conclusion of that particular struggle. The believer who has gone through a hardship, whether personal, emotional, financial, or physical, knows that once Allah has decreed that the trial is finished, it is truly done. The burden is lifted, and there is no longer a reason for the same challenge to reappear. The phrase, "it is over," is a reminder that the believer will not be burdened by the same difficulty again. In Islam, there is a deep understanding that once Allah has closed the chapter on a hardship, it marks a fresh start for the believer. This is because Allah's mercy ensures that no one is tested beyond their capacity. Allah says in the Quran, "Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear." Quran 286. This verse reassures us that once the trial has reached its conclusion, the believer has been strengthened, purified, and prepared for what lies ahead. The end of a trial is not a signal to forget about the lessons learned or the growth experienced during the hardship. On the contrary, it is an opportunity for the believer to reflect on how they have been transformed by the trial and to recognize Allah's presence throughout their journey. The believer is encouraged to remember that it was through Allah's mercy and support that they were able to endure and overcome the challenge. "It is over" signifies not only the end of the struggle, but also the reward for patience, faith, and reliance on Allah. 9. the role of prayer and tawakkul, trust in Allah. In Islam, prayer, salah, and tawakkul, trust in Allah, are the two pillars that help a believer navigate through life's struggles. During difficult times, these practices become even more significant, as they serve as a direct connection to Allah, providing strength and guidance when challenges arise. Once Allah says, "It is over," prayer and trust become the tools through which the believer can fully embrace the peace and the closure that comes after the trial. Tawakkul, or placing one's complete trust in Allah, means believing that Allah has the best plan for you, even when the outcome is not clear. It's an acknowledgement that, while we may take actions and make efforts to solve our problems, ultimately, the outcome is in Allah's hands. Allah commands the believer to trust in Allah and He will guide you through. Quran Surah 359. Tawakkul is not a passive act. It requires action paired with reliance on Allah's will. It is the understanding that the believer is not alone during their struggles, and Allah will never abandon them. Prayer is another vital tool for the believer in times of trial. Salah, the 5 daily prayers, help ground the believer and keep them focused on their relationship with Allah. In the midst of hardship, prayer serves as a form of communication with Allah, where the believer can express their hopes, fears, and gratitude. Through prayer, the believer finds solace, even in the most challenging moments. The Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, said, "When any of you is in need, let him call upon Allah with sincerity and trust." Sunan Abu Dawood. This hadith reminds us that during times of difficulty, turning to Allah with sincerity and trust brings relief. 10. Conclusion. Renewed faith and moving forward. As we reach the end of this journey, it's important to reflect on the core message of today's discussion, that no matter how difficult our struggles may be, your case is closed and it is over once Allah decides. Allah, in His infinite wisdom and mercy, assures the believer that every trial has an end, and that relief will come after hardship. Once the case is closed, it is not merely the end of suffering, but the beginning of spiritual renewal, growth, and a fresh start. The end of a trial is not something to fear, but rather a moment to rejoice in the knowledge that Allah has granted us closure and peace. Our faith is strengthened through the trials we face, and we emerge from them with renewed trust in Allah's plan. We come to realize that these challenges, while difficult, were meant to bring us closer to Allah, to purify our hearts, and to help us grow spiritually. As we continue our journey in this world, we must always remember that every hardship has an expiration date. The promise that you will never go through this again is a reminder of Allah's mercy and His ability to transform our circumstances. After every hardship, there is ease, and the believer should trust that when Allah closes the case, it is indeed over.